Welcome to the Darkstream. Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and Voxservative. Thanks for tuning in. If you're not aware, Gab has gone ahead and filed its lawsuit that it had originally planned to file yesterday. Apparently the discussions that were alluded to, which were the reason why they didn't file yesterday, apparently were not sufficiently productive. So, now, the irony of the situation is that it's directly tied in to my petition against Gab. I don't know what kind of advice that the three members of the Gab management team are getting, but it doesn't appear to be very good. It doesn't appear to be very good because they're shooting themselves in the foot. The position that they are taking, the position that they have taken in response to my complaints and to the complaints of a number of other people, some of which are now being directed to their registrar, is actually giving Google a very solid excuse to keep them off the Play Store. In fact, the irony is that if Google wants to, or if Gab wants to get on the Play Store, Google is openly telling them to do so by doing what I'm asking them to do. I'm not turning on Gab. I am telling them to take down the defamation. I am telling them to moderate the content, which I have been telling them since last November. Okay? Some of you don't realize how long I've been saying this. Okay? I was telling them to do this before I was affected. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be trying to save them. I am not trying to save them. But neither am I trying to harm them. All right? When people ask me my opinion, when people ask me for my advice, I give it to them. All right? Now, maybe in this most recent circumstance, my advice was unwanted and it was unsolicited. But it is exactly the same advice that I gave them originally back in November and that I gave them again about 3 weeks ago, whenever it was that the situation with the registrar and Andrew Anglin popped up. So I have been entirely consistent in this. All right? It's not like I'm telling them anything different than I told them in November, that I told them again a month ago. I am still telling them the same thing. Get your act together and clean that shit up. Defamation is not free speech. Extortion is not free speech. It's just, to me, it's indicative of a complete lack of not only professionalism, but an understanding of how the world works. This is the level of solipsism and, yes, binary thinking that is required to think that you can simply say, we support free speech, do whatever you want, and if you don't like it, mute it. that's not viable. That was never viable. You know. And so, I mean, Google has specifically said, this is something that Gab quoted Google saying, this claim is baseless, and we're happy to defend our decision in court if need be. In order to be on the Play Store, social networking apps need to demonstrate a sufficient level of moderation, including for content that encourages violence and advocates hate against groups of people, blah, blah, blah. This is a long-standing rule and clearly stated in our developer policies. This developer is welcome to appeal the suspensions if they've addressed the policy violations and are compliant with our developer program policies. Okay? That is Google's statement. It is very clear. Their policies predate Gab's existence. And now here's Andrew Torba's response. You know, Gab is not going to get Twitter banned from the Play Store. Here's Andrew Torba's response. Folks, we need your help. Start saving and archiving every example of hate speech on other social networks. We're going to build a huge database of them. This is not going to help Gab at all. Andrew, if I was Google, I would quote Andrew Torba talking about the hundreds of thousands or 2 million or whatever accounts that were deleted from Facebook. Twitter has deleted lots and lots of posts, lots and lots of users. I don't know how many, but many, many, many. Here's the thing. They have to demonstrate a sufficient level of moderation. That's a pretty nebulous term. It's a pretty nebulous term, and Google defines it. Nobody else. Gab cannot demonstrate a sufficient level of moderation because Gab openly brags about not moderating. Gab openly threatens to harass its users who complain to the registrar and force them to moderate their content. You know, Gab has absolutely no way whatsoever of passing that test that predates their existence and cannot possibly have been aimed at them. You know, so, I mean, you know, I actually said previously that, you know, Google has treated Gab unfairly. I was wrong. Google has treated Gab entirely in line with its predefined terms of service. And its policies were established before Gab was ever formed. Now, what Gab is trying to do is they're trying to say, well, look, we were being targeted and harassed because we said we were going to hire James Damore, and that's why Google has it in for us. To which Google can very clearly say, we haven't paid any attention to this little app. You know, it's one of however many million on our store. And it was never compliant with our developer program policies. We didn't know about the policy violations. Once they drew our attention, then we realized they were not compliant, and so we kicked them off. And here's the thing that's going to absolutely kill Gab's case. They've said they're welcome to appeal the suspension if they've addressed the policy violations. Well, what are the policy violations? The stuff that among other things, the stuff that I'm complaining about in my legal petition, which you can be damn certain that every member of Google's legal team has already read. They know Torba's anti-moderation status. All right? I mean, there's a very good chance that if it gets to that, if it gets further down the road, Google will be Google is very well aware of me. I mean, trust me. Not only did their CEO obliquely refer to my blog. My blog is on their site, and I also happen to be friendly acquaintances with several fairly high-level Google executives. Now, that doesn't mean that I think that they're always playing fair. But here's the thing about Google, is that they have historically generally played relatively fair with people. And, if you look at the various, Google abuses, it mostly isn't Google. It's mostly YouTube. And so, now obviously, the new CEO, what I hear from my Google sources is that he tends to be, he's not a strong CEO, and so he tends to get leaned on by the SJWs. Maybe he'll learn not to do that because of the whole James Damore debacle. Maybe he won't. It doesn't matter. That's up to them. But the point is that Google is actually playing much more fair with Gab than I believe Apple had. And so Google and somebody asked the question, well, what if Gab is able to identify other, other apps that are also in violation of this? That's not going to do them any good. The fact that there might be somebody else who happened to get away with it because Google wasn't paying attention does not mean that you have license to simply ignore the developer program policies or their general developer policies. You have to abide by those things. Gab not only hasn't abided by those things, Gab has very publicly and openly stated that they will not and will never abide by those policies. I can tell you right now that the first thing that the Google lawyers are going to do is going to petition the judge to simply throw it out. And unless they've got much better arguments than it looks like that they're making, then why are they trying to save, if they're trying to save and archive examples of hate speech on other social networks, that means that their core position is incredibly weak. If that's what they're putting their effort into, it suggests that their case is every bit as bad as it looks. But here, I wish they'd see sense too. But remember, my simply pointing out the totally freaking obvious defamation is not free speech simply got them to, threaten to release my emails and threaten to release phone calls between us, and caused a lot of people, a fair number of people, to just claim that, oh, you're a crybaby, you've ruined your brand, blah, 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 blah. My position is exactly the same. My position is exactly the same as Google's. Google is going to, I told you guys that this would happen. Not that it would be Google that would use it against Gab. I told you that someone is going to use it. Google is now using it 2 days after I filed my, was it 2 days. I guess we filed it on Monday. So they're using it 4 days after that. No, an unmoderated Gab, an unmoderated anything, is not viable in the future. The only way that you can permit a totally unmoderated thing is you have to get everybody to specifically sign on to it and waive their various rights, their legal rights to complain about defamation or anything else. Okay? You cannot simply say, oh, we just believe in free speech and blah, 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 and that sort of thing. You know, the only unmoderated things that survive because nobody cares. And the reason that nobody cares is because they are fairly small. They are fairly small sites that most people just don't even know exists. But you know, if you've got regular, normal people who don't want to see photoshops of their wives being gang raped, who don't want to be called pedophiles and have people openly claiming that they fuck little boys and all that sort of thing, which basically covers about, I don't know, what, 98, 99% of the population. You know, it's just not a viable thing. You know, I mean, you can prove me wrong. You know, you can go ahead and set something up and try to get them, to get people to sign up for that. But most people are not going to. Yeah, and that's right. I mean, that's a way to put it. Either moderate your comments or moderate your users. You know, you're going to have to do one or the other, and to pretend otherwise is simply not viable. And even the blockchain thing is not necessarily going to get you out of that conundrum, because you have created a system that permits it. Google's position is that Gab has to moderate hate speech. And again, it's not just hate speech. You know, what they specifically said is they have to demonstrate a sufficient level of moderation. You know, Gab has repeatedly and openly refused to even consider any sort of moderation. And so, I don't know what he's talking. He's not talking to me. I don't do that. Anyhow, it's you know, I find this all a bit ironic, more than a bit ironic, because, and that's why I said in order to win, Gab has to lose. If Gab wants to get on the Google Store, they're going to have to delete all of the posts that I've been complaining about and more. They're going to have to go and they're going to have to come up with a policy to discipline the users who left those posts. We're not just talking about me. We're talking about dozens of people that have been affected now. The Legal Legion of Evil has been arranging things and making it easier for people who have been attacked, you know, in a manner that, you know, appears to approach defamation, and they've put together a system that is allowing those people to easily get those things reported to the right people at Gab's registrar. You know, I don't need to do that. I have the resources. No, we're not going class action. This is simply, there's two ways to get redress from Gab right now. One is the way that I'm going about it, which is filing a court order. That is expensive, that is inefficient, and it takes a lot of time, and for most people it takes a lot of money. You know, so So that's not viable for most people. And that's what Gab specifically asked for. That's the thing that people keep trying to ignore. Gab said, if you don't like it, go get a court order. I said, okay, and I did. Well, I haven't gotten the court order yet. I've asked for it. That's it. The other way, which unfortunately for Gab is probably more dangerous to them, is that you go to their registrar, Asia Registry, which is based in Australia and New Zealand, and then you send a complaint to the person. We have the specific. We've talked to the specific person who is the decision maker there, and you supply them with the various examples of whatever it is, defamation, etc., etc. The thing is that they actually have criminal defamation in Australia, and so that's why I think that's why it was necessary that they were given 48 hours to take down the England host or something. It obviously violated some. It went beyond the civil and into the criminal in Australian terms, and so that's why they came down like that. Well, the same thing's going to happen. Gab is going to be told by the registrar, you need to take this stuff down, and you need to do it within whatever period of time. Last time they said 48 hours. Alternatively, if the registrar is sick of this bullshit and is sick of the fact that Torba is not only not doing anything about it, but is actually threatening to attack his users and harass his users for complaining to the registrar, there is a non-zero chance that they will simply pull the plug on Gab, and Gab will have to go find a different registrar. So, and the problem is, the thing is, all of this could have been so easily avoided and can still be avoided. Andrew Torba can call me tomorrow and say, hey, what do we need to do to take care of this stuff? I will tell him. I will, for free, design a system that will allow them to deal with this stuff easily. I would like Gab to be successful even now, because I think that we do need alternatives to Twitter, and because, frankly, I don't want to have to do it. All right? We can do it. InfoGalactic can add a Twitter-type component. It wouldn't take us that long. But I don't want the headache of managing it. We've got enough on our plate. We want Andrew Torba and Utsav and E to be successful. We think, I don't want to do a browser either. I want Brave to be successful. And so, anyhow, unfortunately, I think that, we'll see. We'll see. But, it's just one of those things. My goodness, these storm poopers just. I find the failed writer thing particularly funny. Even the SJWs dropped that theme about 3-4 years ago. When my books started becoming #1 category bestsellers. Anyhow, we'll see what happens. If you're a friend of Andrew Torba's, I'd encourage you to talk some sense into him, because this is not going well. And it's not likely to go well. And it's the kind of thing that could end up destroying Gab, which I don't think is in the interest of anyone who is uncomfortable with the Twitter Trust and Safety Council. So, with regards to the antitrust stuff, I don't know. I have no idea. I will comment, though, people talk about, oh, antitrust. Okay. Well, what's one of the first things that you should probably keep in mind when you start talking about antitrust? People say, well, they broke up AT&T. They broke up Standard Oil. Okay. So here's a question for you. How long did it take to do that? The first time the Sherman Antitrust Act was actually passed because they wanted to take down Standard Oil. 1890 it was passed. In 1892, Standard Oil lost the first Sherman antitrust-related lawsuit. So it's 2 years just for that. It was another 19 years before the Supreme Court finally upheld the lower court rulings and Standard Oil was actually broken up into 30-something different pieces. AT&T also took, I'm not sure how long it took. I think it took 12 years, perhaps? Let me look it up here. I think I wrote it down. Yeah. Sorry. It was 17 years for Standard Oil to break up. It was 8 years from the first antitrust filing to the breakup of AT&T. So even if this whole anti-duopoly thing is successful, even if Gab manages to beat the best lawyers that Apple and Google can hire, they have to assume a minimum of an 8-year legal battle. Okay, is Gab set up to fight this for 8 years? I don't think so. I don't think they have the necessary resources to do that. You don't pick a fight where the probabilities indicate that you're going to lose, especially when you are very publicly stating that you refuse to do what you have to do in order to get on. What I recommend that Gab do is that they first talk to Google and say, what exactly is it that you want us to do? Tell us exactly what you want us to do, and we'll do it. You said you're willing to consider this if we get in line with your policy. Would one of your people please tell us what we need to do? And then they should also talk to me, and I will tell them probably almost exactly the same thing that Google's people will tell them. If they don't help with defamation, does that make some kind of unlawful or pirate service? No, I don't think so. There are some paths in which Gab could become responsible for the content that is on there, but it's complicated. I don't completely understand it, and it's not even relevant to the next at least 2 steps in the current process. So I'm not concerned about that at all. I'm not worried about that at all. I'm not thinking about that at all. We're just taking this one step at a time. Not getting too excited about it. Just, all I will say is that one way or another, all of that defamation and all of those posts are going to come down. I said at the beginning. I've said it. I've repeated it. I'm saying it again now, and I'm sure I'll be repeating it again in the future. All of those posts, all of those defamatory posts, all of those pictures attacking my wife and whatnot are going to come down. It can be done the easy way. It can be done the hard way. It doesn't matter. It's going to happen one way or the other. Because Gab needs to do it for its own good. You know, they don't need to do it for me. They don't need to do it for the other users who have been attacked and abused and insulted and defamed. They need to do it if they want to be on the Google Store. They need to do it if they want to not be shut down at registrar after registrar. They need to do it, period. I said this before, I'll say it again. You know, just because I don't like something does not have anything to do with the fact that the legal realities are what they are, that Google's terms of service are what they are, that Google's developer policies are what they are. All of those things predated Gab. All of the laws relating to defamation and defamation per se predated Gab. So, you know, don't put this on me. You know, I'm not going to pretend that I'm not involved in some way. I'm not going to pretend that I don't have an interest in some way. But this entire situation would exist in almost exactly the same way that it exists today, even if I had never, ever created an account on Gab. So keep that in mind before you try to throw personalities into it and all this, that, and the other thing. You know, this is a relatively clear-cut case. And, you know, Gab's central mythos that, you know, speaking freely means you can say absolutely anything you want, that you can post anything you want, and that they don't have to moderate any of it. I mean, that is simply a false mythos. It's not true. And, you know, they're beginning to learn that. They're going to have to come to terms with it sooner or later. So that's the situation. For those of you who are interested in supporting Voxdiversity, it's a series of informational and educational videos, 20-minute videos that we're producing. We're starting to work on the first one next week as soon as I get the equipment in. If you'd like to support it, we've got a great set of rewards. It's a very worthwhile project. It's something that people have been asking for about 3 years. And you can go to voxdiversity.com or you can go to freestarter.com and you'll find the project. So anyhow, thanks for tuning in. I hope this was informative. And if you feel like commenting further on it, the top post on the blog is about this. I have all of the necessary contact information for everyone except for anonymous people. I'll be sending out emails to you. So, thanks very much. And like I said, please feel free to comment further on the blog if you like. Have a good evening.